Hey, this is Troy Taylor with the Championship Football Coaches Clinic on Totem Sports. And this is Coach Lambo, my assistant coach. And we got Timothy Jean-Pierre, the head football coach at Hermitage High School today. How are you doing today, Coach?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm doing all right.
We appreciate you coming on, man.
Yes, sir. No, I appreciate you having me.
So today, what I was thinking about is we always have these young coaches. Like when I was a young coach, my goal was to be a head coach by the time I was 25, which I only started coaching when I was 22. So, and it's kind of naive to even think that you're ready, but there's so many young coaches out there that want to be the head coach. And I know, some of your story about, who you coached under and what you've done and the road that it took you to become head coach at one of the most successful programs in Virginia, Hermitage High School. So, could you just tell, the Championship Football Coaches Clinic and Totem Pole Nation about yourself?
Well, I'm currently the head coach at Hermitage High School. This is, I've had 2 seasons, interim year and then 1 official year without the interim tag. I graduated from Hermitage. I'm from the Richmond area. I'm from Southside for real, but
what elementary school?
I went to G.H. Reed.
Right on. And then you went to middle school there too?
Then I went to Elkhart Middle School.
Okay, right on Whole Street.
Yeah, which they tore down now. I guess it's called Whole Street Middle or whatever they call it. It's
Riverside.
Yeah. So, I was a city kid, but kind of just like a typical city kid moving all around the city. Football was my go-to. Interesting enough, I never wore football cleats until I played football in Hermitage.
Wow.
And I thought it was cheating when I wore cleats. I was like, hold on, coach, I can do so. Anyway, I remember the cleats I wore, they were sharks. But anyways, I played my 10th grade year under Coach Jarvis. He moved me to varsity after 2 years or two games on JV because I didn't play my 9th grade year. And Coach PJ Adams, the head coach at Godwin, was actually my fullback my sophomore year.
Wow.
Football was just a passion of mine. Ultimately, graduated from Hermitage High School 2002. Wasn't the strongest academic student, but my passion of football, wouldn't allow me to not pursue playing in college. And then I went to Bowie State. After that, my freshman year at Bowie State, I was on a partial scholarship and made some freshman year mistakes, some bad decisions. And then, Coach Gillis at Norfolk State gave me an opportunity to re-earn a full scholarship. It was a double blessing, or, it was really a blessing in disguise because I had the ability to move up in the division football. So I went from Division II to Division I because I wasn't a Division I qualified out of high school, which is why we preach the importance of, staying on top of your grades, this, that, and the third. And obviously, ultimately, why we do what we do. But so then I transferred to Norfolk State, and I played under Gillis, and I finished there under Coach Pete Adrian, who I think now is in the XFL. Well, he was in XFL at one point in time before he came to us. Anyways, so then after I graduated from Norfolk State, had a ball there at Norfolk State. Had a ball. I can reiterate that a million times. But, I came back home to Richmond. I knew I wanted to get into coaching. So, obviously, you start where you went to school at. And, Coach Kane gave me an opportunity. And I started out being a 9th grade D coordinator along with Coach Fitzgerald. Coach Justin Fitz, he was a 9th grade offensive coordinator. And we kind of started our careers there at the same time. And I'm looking for a job placement. So then Highland Springs hired me as a teacher. So then I took my talents, I would say. It just made more sense for me to coach in a building that I was already teaching in terms of influence. So, I started coaching at Highland Springs and I coached there for, I graduated in Norfolk State in 2007. I started coaching in 2008. And in 2009, I was at Highland Springs until about 2013. And I was the JV defensive coordinator there that entire stint. I actually finished off as a JV head coach, but I had conversations with Coach Johnson about being back at my alma mater where I wanted to be. And ultimately, I made that transition once it became available through conversations with Coach Kane. Just wanted to work with Coach Kane under his system. So once I got back here, you know, I became the linebackers coach. I wanted to be the running backs coach when when Derrick was here, but just to help him with his running style. But I got here, I was a linebackers coach, and it kind of just took off from there. I just kind of took on responsibilities and, you know, so forth and so on. It's just been a lot of different transitional processes here at Hermitage I've been fortunate enough to see. And, you know, honestly, being a head coach was not on the forefront of my mind. I did want to be a part of a program. I love being a defensive coordinator. I think offense is fun as well, but the ability to stop offenses from doing what it is that they want to do, I just take more pride in that. And, you know, that was my, you know, niche at the time. So, you know, I was coaching under Coach Myers. Coach Myers was the defensive coordinator. You know, he DB's coach, I was a linebackers coach, and then I grew to become the assistant defensive coordinator, get a little more involved with the scheming. But behind the scenes, I was always involved with a lot of things, which I didn't realize would ultimately land and lead me to where I am now. But there's been a lot of processes, man, and I've been fortunate for real to have a lot of great examples, you know, and a lot of confirmation on what to do and what not to do. And, you know, I think there are certain pieces and things that you can take from a lot of your coaches, but you, at the end of the day, you got to kind of make it your own. So, you know, when I got the head coaching job here or got the call, you know, it was a surprise. It was honestly a surprise. You know, and obviously I had the interim tag, but I think everything that I did prior to that just kind of prepared me to be more ready to just take on the task of being an official head coach at Hermitage, along with the examples that I had, you know, starting with obviously Coach Kane. So, you know, and I can elaborate on all of that. I don't know if you got.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions.
Yes.
So, the first thing I want to say is like, it was a surprise to you, you say, but you're humble that you were the head coach at Hermitage. But I mean, it wouldn't have been a surprise to me if you wouldn't have been the head coach at Hermitage 2 times before 2 other guys got the job. I thought you would have been the head coach after Coach Kane to keep that going. So it kind of says something to, I want the young coaches out there to hear, is that what happens is people see you and they remember your name and they start talking and saying, hey, that guy right there, man, that guy's going to be a head coach one day. Like he's going to be the next coach at Hermitage, or he's going to be the next head coach. There's always that young coach out there that people are talking about. Like, who is that guy? Because they see you at clinics, they see you on the field, they know you're making an impact. So I just wanted to say that. If you want to say anything about that, what I'm just saying, because I remember I saw you at the AFCA convention, and yeah. I told you that I thought you was going to be the head coach. So, like, it might not always happen on our time, but it does happen in time.
That is a fact. I guess for me, because I wasn't actively pursuing being a head coach, even when the first interview came in, like after Coach Kane retired, and, you know, I went for the interview really for experience purposes. I'm like, well, why not? You know, maybe 1 year down the line, I want to be a head coach. I really didn't interview to be like, I want this job that bad. But I did want to be a part of that process. And at that time, I was, you know, I was under the impression that somebody else was getting it. So, you know, and through both interview processes, because I've interviewed for the job here twice. I mean, I'm lying, 3 times. I got it on the 3rd time, but it was more of an offer the 3rd time. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's interesting to me because, like I said, it wasn't on the top of my list being a head coach. Being a part of a program and accomplishing the goals and all of that stuff was the same. But at this point, you know, when I got to the 3rd interview, there was no other direction for me to go except for to be a head coach. So it made sense. And, you know, like I said, I'm grateful to have the examples that I have.
Yeah, I want to talk about each of those. Um, like I always have guys call me and they say, like, I got an interview, what do I need to be ready for? And Coach Gary Chilcote, who's coached with you at Highland Springs, he gave me some good advice. He said, Troy, don't talk too much. Because if you keep talking, it's kind of like going on a first date. If you keep talking, eventually you're going to say something she don't like. So that was some good advice. But really, like I told a guy recently, when you interview, every question they ask you, you should be able to draw on an experience, even if you haven't been the head coach, that would show that you are ready for the job. Like, how do you handle recruiting? How do you handle fundraising? How do you handle the offseason? How do you handle parents? Even though you may not be the head coach where you're at, you need to be looking for those responsibilities. Coach Bowles, he allowed me to, I'm not saying be the head coach, but he gave me enough responsibility. So, talk a little bit about the interviewing process. Because I have one guy that wants me to call him right now about, getting ready for an interview to be the head coach. Like, what should they prepare themselves for? Or should it be preparation that they've already done?
Well, obviously you need to know, first and foremost, the population that you're going to be coaching. And that's one area I had a one-up on because I've just been so involved throughout the offseason, during the season. I came through the school. So the community aspect for me was a little bit easier for me to piece together just because I knew the pieces. But it's still a part of bringing those pieces together. Because the culture of the school, you got to get a buy-in. You got to be able to buy in, and you got to be able to have a vision that has a plan that you can paint a picture for people to see the plan. And not only can you, do they have to see the plan, but it has to make sense from a administrative level as well. So, there's a lot of things that people don't realize, and sometimes it's all about a fit.
Do you speak the same language? Do you speak the same language? Are you? Because if you don't speak the same language and you're not one of them, even though you may not be from the same place, it's not going to work out. You don't.
Yes. So, through the interview process, obviously being polished is cool, fine, and dandy. But what is your vision? What is your plan of action? And where do you see yourself taking the program? What's your first year plan? What's your 5-year plan? And how do you plan to build those bridges in the community? How do you plan? Because everybody can say, I'm going to raise money, I'm going to do this, but what's your plan to do it? And if you don't have that experience, what experiences have you been involved with that can show us that you understand what it takes to execute the plan? So it's really, the interview is really about gaining trust, from the administration, from not the players as well. Obviously, that comes afterwards, but the administration and the community, because the community can run you out of a program faster than administration.
Yeah, I always tell guys, like, if they're going to interview for a job, they need to go on that school's website. They need to see what that principal's mission is and what their vision is, and Absolutely. You need to be a part of that. Like at LC Bird, our principal, her mission is work hard, play hard, take care of each other. So that our football mission, we fit into that, and our vision is like we want to change lives. We want to get kids to the next level, and then we want to compete for championships. So we keep it simple. So it's like being the head football coach, basically the principal and the AD, they want you to make sure that you're in line with their vision. Can you Absolutely. Talk a little bit about that? But you've been in the culture of Hermitage for so long. How many years were you? You played there. You played for Coach Kane.
The culture here at Hermitage is so rich. We're going through our transition.
Look behind you. Like everybody that's in the clinic right now, that's history, man. That's tradition. That's hard to beat. That wins games. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, we call this the Kane era. Shouts out to Coach Kane. Hermitage High School has always had athletes here. And it's always been one of those kind of well-mixed schools. But when Coach Kane got here, he established some consistency. And if you know Coach Kane, he's a master organizer, master of organization. And, you know, that culture, you know, once you establish it and then you have a culture where freshmen are coming in and seeing the work ethic of the guys that are being successful on the next level, the culture ultimately will take care of itself. So, you know, a lot of these guys, man, most of them are my younger brothers. I was Coach Kane's first class. So, you know, I take pride in being in his first class. We went 7-2 that year. We didn't make the playoffs. That was the year 9/11 happened. So we didn't get to play that makeup game against Atlee, but that's when only 4 teams went to the playoffs. So the culture was a little bit different, but that was the beginning, and that's what I take pride in. But I'm excited for what was built on that foundation. You know, I'm proud of what was built on that foundation. And, you know, a lot of these faces that you see are still back in the community. A couple of guys are on my staff. I got Joseph Clayton on my staff, Coach Brian Brown. He's on my staff. He's my receivers coach now. You know, Jeffrey Fitzgerald. He's my defensive line coach. Coach Earl Kenny. He was here my senior year. He drove me to college. He drove me to Bowie State. He's my assistant head coach. You know, a wealth of knowledge. So I'm very fortunate to have guys around. Justin Carr, you know, one of my defensive back coaches. And you know, we got a lot of guys who invested. Got some younger guys, Woody and Wyatt Winborn, Jawan Watson, Joquan Watson, Nigel Wilder, John Kenny, Coach Kenny's younger son.
So everybody pretty much is part of your tribe. Everybody already is a part of your culture. It isn't like, hey, man, this is how we do things. Like they already know because they played for the same head coach that you played for and they coached under that guy. And y'all know the Hermitage way.
Absolutely. The Herm way. So those things do matter when you're, you know, at this point kind of rebuilding the culture. You know, those things do matter, you know, and developing your coaches matter because that's one thing Coach Kane took serious. He made sure that his coaches were developed and, you know, the expectation didn't change from player to coach. The expectations were the same. You know what I mean? If you didn't do what you're supposed to do, he'd let you know as a coach, just like he would let you know as a player.
Accountability.
So yeah, absolutely. Accountability is key, especially when you want to be a successful program. Yeah, the culture continues, you know, and I tell the kids all the time, will your face be up there? You're the next guy. You're no different than these guys. All of these guys play JV.
Yeah, that's motivation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, it's exciting, man. It's exciting to just be a part of it. Obviously from a different perspective as a head coach and dealing with new challenges as a head coach, as you know. But it all grows you, man. It all grows you.
So like the old saying is that like high school coaches want to go to college guys want to go to pro, and pro guys want to go back to high school. So like there's so many rec coaches, youth football coaches that are out there that are always, oh man, I want to coach high school. And like you talked about playing rec football in Southside Richmond and the importance. I mean, I tell guys all the time, dude, why don't you just coach youth football? There's no difference. Like you have more of an impact. They're more sponges. You change kids' lives. Like they absorb everything. So talk about your rec coaches and how important that is in building the program, and the rec coaches. What did they teach you, and who were some of those guys?
Well, sheesh. Coach Getty, I don't even remember where he is at now. But he was one of my coaches. I had so many different coaches when I played for Reed. Brother Charles used to be at the rec league all the time. Brother Charles, you see him, you know, I pray he's still alive, but he be riding his bike all through the city of Richmond. You find him from the East End to the Chesterfield on a bike. And I literally think he rides his bike everywhere. But the rec coaches were, like, when I first started playing football, I was scared. I was scared to death. And they used to make us do Oklahomas. My first football drill was an Oklahoma. So I was so scared that I ran a kid over. And that became like a staple for me, like just running people over, you know, and obviously eliminating the fear. But, you know, I think rec is important in reference to developing toughness, developing IQ, and technique. which is something I would love to be a part of in reference to educating our rec league coaches, which is something that we used to do here. Coach Kane used to do here. We used to hold rec league clinics for the rec coaches so we could properly educate them on how to develop young players. Because you do have a culture of rec league coaches that some of them are not developing players. To be real with you, some of them are just recruit talent and they let the talented kids play. And then those same kids end up hitting the wall because they haven't developed or learned how to develop.
Or practice.
Yes.
Or practice. Just pick them up on Saturday type.
Yes. So, for me, if you're a rec league coach, the most hurtful thing you can do to a player is just reward him for being talented. Because in the future, that doesn't work. That doesn't work when it comes to high school recruiting. That doesn't work in college. And people think the transfer portal is cool and all, but it's a whole level of business that needs to be understood when it comes to getting on that level. Because, talent alone ain't going to do it. You got to know how to represent yourself, and you got to know how to make the best decision for you that's going to benefit your future. But rec league coaches all around, man, I just encourage them guys to, be genuine, educate the parents, but educate the kids, teach them fundamentals. And to all the presidents and the organizations out here, make sure y'all are hiring coaches that are invested in kids. And I know that's not easy because the rec league, man, you go to these rec league games, man, woo, them coaches and them refs, I pray for them. You know what I mean? Because it get crazy out there. The fans are right there behind you. They screaming, they cussing. And you still got to keep in mind that you are, coaching up kids. So, I think 804 in this central region, man, rec league is taking off. But I think there needs to be some, just a little bit of a closer look into how we're developing players. Because some people are in it for the wrong reasons, and it hurts the kids at the end of the day, man. So, and we got to deal with them. Once they get to high school, I hate, you don't know how many times I have to tell parents, this is not rec league. We don't owe kids reps just because you are on the team. This is different. Now, we get up on teams, yeah, everybody can play. However, you're trying to win a game in high school. You know what I mean? Because if we don't win games, now our jobs are, at risk. And ultimately, that's the aspect that some parents don't understand, transitioning from rec league to high school, which may be different in Chesterfield because y'all don't have middle school football. You know what I mean? And we do. So, it's just interesting. It's just definitely interesting. But I think the culture shaping, I just hope it shapes the right direction because the kids are going to benefit from it if it does.
Right on. So, you played at Hermitage, you played for Coach Kane. What did you learn? Because we have people from all around the country, man, watching this.
Man,
it's 20,000 subs on Totem polls. I mean, they could be anywhere, but Hermitage High School has a stadium that looks like a college. I mean, Chester Fritz, played football at Purdue. He was great. He was one of the winningest coaches in the history of Central Virginia. And, you played for, was it 2 different coaches? What was that like going through a coaching change as a player? And was there anything that you learned from that that you use today as a coach?
Well, I've always been so focused on my development that I guess a new coach was an opportunity for me to just display what I was working on. We had Coach Jarvis here, in the Jarvis era. And then, once Kane came, when Kane first saw me, I was on the field working with Anthony Dabney. We was literally on the field when he came and saw us. And as a coach now, I'm thinking he probably looked at us and was like, oh, those are my 2 this, or these are my 2 that's. It was definitely interesting. Coach Kane brought in his own personal chef. Coach Kane started interacting with us about grades. Coach Kane definitely brought a whole nother level of organization and thought process that provoked a different thought in me in reference to truly transition. Because a lot of kids think it's just about playing football. A lot of kids think I'm good, so I'll go to college. No. You gotta cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure you go to class. And you also gotta understand the game of football. So the interesting thing is I didn't even start learning football until my sophomore year in college. I was already on full scholarship. As a running back, all I needed was the ball. Tell me what hole it was supposed to be. Everything else was just, and I tell all running backs that running back is not a position that requires the most football IQ. However, the game has changed to where running backs do need to know more now than they needed to know in the past. And it's why running back is it's the lowest value position in the NFL, because you can always find a running back. But so it was interesting and unique having Coach Kane come in, and provide that level of structure for us, which ultimately we flourished in. It was just that level of structure. My brother graduated a year after me, so he got a chance to play in that system twice. They lost to Thomas Dale his senior year. But, that structure just creating some consistency, and I always pay attention to consistency and what it is that creates consistency. And it's structure, and that's one of the main things I got from Coach Kane is structure. Structure. And Coach Kane, I kind of put him, almost like a father figure at that point, because he was hard-nosed and he was stern and he didn't bend for, anything that existed outside the standard. And that's what you need as a young man, Today's generation is a little different, but I think at the same time, they still need the same thing.
Yeah, so, Patrick, for the viewers that are watching, Patrick Kane is the winningest coach in Hermitage history. He's one of the winningest coaches in Central Virginia. His dad was a state championship wrestling coach at Meadowbrook High School. And he actually was the head coach at Dinwiddie High School, which is a more rural school, before he went to Hermitage. And he was not as successful at Dinwiddie. And he told me in a podcast, you can watch the Ball in VA, that it was because, he thought he was too hard on his assistants, because he expected them to have the same level of dedication that he had year round. And he talks about he went to Bird for 2 years. And it's funny because it's a small world. I was just starting out coaching, and Coach Kane was the guy that told me, hey, Troy, if you want to be a coach, you need to become a teacher. And I was coaching, I wasn't teaching. And, I got a job teaching at Meadowbrook, and he went to Hermitage. And I remember, I was coaching JV, and I walked down to the game field where y'all were scrimmaging Meadowbrook that year. And y'all had Dwayne Brown and Fontel Mines, and Meadowbrook had a huge team too. So that was my first year at Meadowbrook, was when we scrimmaged y'all your senior year. It's crazy how much of an impact somebody like Patrick Kane, even though I didn't play for him, I never coached with him, but he's had such a big impact on me. So I know he's had a big impact on you.
Absolutely.
You talked about going to Highland Springs, and, for the people that are outside of the state of Virginia, Highland Springs has won 5 state championships in the last, I think it's 7 years. They're located near the airport, the east end of Richmond, and Coach Loren Johnson has built a powerhouse program over there. And Coach said that he went over there and coached with him and, Gary Chilcote, who was the head coach at Varina, where Mike Robinson played, who played for the Hawks at fullback. And so many NFL players, and they help so many kids. So, we're going to talk about Coach Loren Johnson, but Gary Chilcote, who passed away, and he was a great assistant coach at Varina, a great head coach. And then he went to Highland Springs as assistant. You got a chance to coach with him. What can you tell me? What did you learn from Gary Chilcote?
Man, Chilcote was a hands-on guy, man. Chilcote wanted to get hands-on, and it was never an excuse not to get better based on what you had. Chilcote was to pull out these little wood boards, and I guess it looked like he made them in the back of the crib or something. Pull them out with his truck, lay them out, and we would work sleds, and I love Chilcote's mindset because he never acted like an older coach. He never acted like an older coach. He always had good energy with him, and he always was straightforward with you on certain information. Some coaches, when they get to a certain level, sometimes they may hoard information, but Chilcote never did. And I think Chilcote liked working with younger coaches. For for whatever reason, and I understand that more now than I did then. But Chilco was the man, used to talk about, even in our fronts, and we should just get in a little bit of football talking. Just the things that you could learn from just listening, which is a phase that I was heavy in at that point, listening, even though, listening is always a skill that we need to use. But he was definitely a big part of, my understanding of what's necessary in high school versus what's not necessary. Because a lot of guys think their level of football IQ is what wins games, when the reality is it's your ability to translate your IQ to your players effectively, which ultimately dictates their ability to execute. So, shouts out to Chilcote and his family and experiences I had with him, man, because definitely priceless.
A great man, and a great mentor to me. Another guy just like Coach Kane. I never played for him, and I never coached with him, but they feel like they're, big brothers to me or uncles, like father type figures. Coach Lambo, you got anything from what you've heard? What's on your heart?
Well, what's on my heart is, you bring all this young wisdom around here. Now, if I wasn't around Troy Taylor, I don't know where I would be. But the question I kind of have, I want to go back to the whole rec coaches thing. You were mentioning earlier about rec coaches and all that. And, I got fired and I wasn't smart as a rec coach. So transitioning from the rec to the high school, what's the day-to-day basis of what's the day-to-day basis of being like a head coach? Because
a high school head coach.
A high school head coach.
Now, what could somebody that was a rec coach, how could you explain to them the differences, or what your responsibility is?
As a high school head coach, we're responsible for fundraising, we're responsible for equipment, we're responsible for reconditioning the helmets, we're responsible for organizing off-season workouts, inventory. We're essentially administrators for the building, grades, recruiting, and it's a lot of different things, community development. Obviously
this just isn't something we do for a season. Like, this is something that we do 24/7, 365. We show up at 7 a.m. We leave at 7 p.m. or later. And it's something we work on year round, and we live it.
That's the biggest thing. Living it, and when you do live it, once you're in a position, you're still kind of doing the same thing, but with just a little bit more details. I will tell people, because we live in that microwave era right now, where people want things without the proper development. So be careful what you ask for, because you don't want your first experience to be horrible. You want to be prepared, and you want to have enough experiences so that you can manage the ebbs and flows, because it's gonna be ebbs and flows. If you have no experience, you can make one false move and because I've seen some really good coaches come into some programs, lay some hammers down, run some kids away, and their thoughts and their intentions were great, but they didn't connect enough to understand how to do it. Because it's high school. These kids aren't on scholarship. They don't have to come. So you got to really incentivize your program. The culture has to be rich. And obviously, I'm fortunate enough to be in a culture that, don't get it twisted. The pressure is here. It's pressure on as a head coach for Hermitage High School. We went 6-4 last year. And at Hermitage, that's an unsuccessful season. So that pressure is there. But because I'm a part of the culture, that was unsuccessful for me. It's not a surprise that's unsuccessful. But for the rec league coaches, I would say this. Know how to deal with grown men. You got to know how to be a leader of men and a leader of young men. You got to know how to stand on your square, and you got to know how to tell adults no sometimes. You got to know how to, for the benefit of the program. Sometimes as a head coach, you got to be the jerk for the benefit of the program. And, the people who have the benefit of the program at heart and at mind that jerk won't affect them. But vice versa, or on the opposite end of that, you'll have people who won't necessarily like that and will move on, which is necessary. Because you don't want anybody around your program that's not fully as invested as you are. Now, don't get it twisted. You're gonna have more responsibilities as a head coach, but the mindset and of level of investment has to be there from your surrounding coaches, because you're only going to be as good as the people that are around you. Because as a head coach, you cannot do everything. That's something that I'm learning. Being able to delegate responsibilities to guys and trust them to do their responsibilities is it can be a task when you're used to doing everything yourself. And that's something that I've dealt with. And I'm still trying to be better at delegating responsibility. So for my rec league coaches, man, for the parents, and you got leagues that are different, but you're required to play kids. In high school, you're not. So how do you communicate that with your parents? How do you communicate with a parent who is coming to talk to you about playing time, and that kid might not be ready, but what do you say to that kid, to that parent? How can you be transparent with the parent without being a jerk? Because there are ways to do that, So, for the rec league coaches, I say, the best thing, if you're trying to be a head coach, you got to be involved with some kind of high school program. And you got to serve in the high school program for a few years and just learn the inner workings of what a high school program is required, because every high school program day to day may be just a little different. But just get a more realistic perspective of what's required, and that'll shape your perspective. Because some guys that want to be a head coach after realizing the reality may not want to do it no more. Because there are a lot of things that we deal with.
You probably heard it. Yeah. Everybody wants to be the head coach until they're the head coach.
Yeah, because you got to take responsibility for everything, regardless of what happened. It's all your fault.
Yeah, Greg Williams, who's defensive coordinator for the Redskins, he said you either coach it or you allow it to happen. And that's kind of what we go by.
Yes,
everybody that's watching, if you want to watch a great podcast, watch the Kirk and Bird show with Mike Smith from the Hampton Crabbers. He talked about his assistant coaches. He looked for three things. And, first, do they love the game? Do they love the kids? And do they love the school? And if you got coaches that have all three of those things, like you could be special. They love the game, they love the kids, and they love the school. And the greatest compliment he said he ever got from Phil Elmasian, who basically brought like the wide tackle 6 and 4-4 defense to Bud Foster and Frank Beamer, was he said the best practices he ever saw was on that Hampton High School practice field. Anywhere. He'd been to 30 different colleges. So that's the greatest compliment you could give a coach, is that the greatest practices were on that field. And you have coached with the GOATs. Really, you coach with the GOATs. You talked about going to Highland Springs, and Coach Johnson, I don't know how many years it was that it took him to win a state championship, but now he's won 5 in 7 years. To talk a little bit about what you learned from Coach Johnson going into that program in Highland Springs and what he was going through to what it became, and what Coach Johnson's meant to you.
Well, yeah, Coach Johnson, has definitely been one of my mentors. I could kind of reach out to him from time to time, just to talk about a couple of things. And, he shed a little bit of light, like during last year, earlier in the 10-year, I would just ask him a couple of questions about just some off-season things, and in reference to timing with colleges. We know how this recruit thing goes. It changes from year to year, the regulations. So, me and Coach Johnson have a pretty good relationship. But the things that I learned from him is, Coach Johnson is a family-oriented guy. Family is important to him. And, obviously, having your faith within yourself allows you to deal with ebbs and flows around you. Because I've seen him deal with a lot of different things, especially when I was there, prior to where the program is now. So, you know, just being able to weigh those ebbs and flows is something that I've learned from him. And, you know, obviously the community aspect and reaching out to kids and, you know, listening to your coaches. Because that's one thing, you know, he always involved his coaches, and everybody who spoke on the sideline, he listened to them. Whether he did what you said or not, that was ultimately based on the game plan. But I remember significant times where he would ask me a question and everybody got their jobs, and he would ask me a question and I would see it go into plan on a play. And, you know, when you're a part of something, you feel good, you know, about your level of contribution, whether it was big or small. So having coaches involved and their input mattering was something that I learned from Coach Johnson, and something that I took from him that I said I would always do if I was put in that position to be a head coach, man. You know, just make sure I got the right guys around me that I can get some good input and we can have some good conversations, and you know, we can put the program in the best position to be successful. So yeah, Coach Johnson, shouts out to Coach Johnson.
So like an older coach once told me, like I asked him a question and he would say, well, Troy, what do you think? And finally one day I asked him, I said, why do you always say that? And he told me, he said, a lot of times if you're the head coach or the coordinator or you're the offensive line coach and someone asks you a question, it isn't that they really want to know your opinion, that they actually want to give theirs. Have you ever heard this or been aware of that? Like, Coach, what color pants we gonna wear this week? What do you think? You know what I'm saying? Because they really just want to tell you, hey, I think we need to wear blue pants. Or
Right.
I'm gonna do pregame warm-ups. Well, how do you want to do them? You know,
Right.
I might be giving out too much. So somebody told me I shouldn't do this podcast because I might be giving out too much information. But have you ever experienced that, or has anyone ever told you that?
Well, I've definitely experienced it. And that's interesting that you say that because I've never heard it put it like that before, but it makes sense.
You ask the person the question back that they just asked you. But once someone knows you do this, they know that what you're doing.
Yes. And then you can't do it. But no, that's interesting. I guess everybody has their own approaches. My thing is, man, let's cut to the chase. That's why it's great to have guys with the same level of investment, because there are no hidden agendas, because I've seen that as well. Especially at Hermitage.
Yeah,
guys
I
have
get into that. So
yeah, man.
You talked a lot about Coach Kane. If there's anything else you want to talk about Coach Kane, you know, that's good. But like when I took the job here, you know, I've been a head coach at Amelia County High School, and that's a rural school. I was there a year, and then I went to Meadowbrook, and I took over probably one of the most successful programs in Central Virginia. And then I left, and I just felt like I needed a change. I'd been there pretty much since you were in high school to 2014, I believe. So I was there like 13 years as assistant head coach. Then I went to Virginia Union for 3 years and worked for Mark James, who's from Fort Lauderdale, Dillard High School, and Boyd Anderson. So like when I got this job, you know, I got hired by Coach Bedwell, who was the AD, and you know they'd won 3 state championships in a row. I think Highland Springs and they won 2 in a row since they won their 3. But Coach Bedwell brought me here, and they had a big article in the Times-Dispatch. I don't know if you remember it, but it was Challenges of Tradition, I think was the title, and it talked about, you know, me becoming the head coach at Berth, and you know the coach that replaced Coach Kane, and it's tests. It was the tests of tradition. So like me, I don't change. Like if I was to take a job in a successful program, I don't change anything. Like how did you used to do it? You know, that sounds good to me. Yeah, y'all won 3 state championships. Like I try to keep things the same. People always ask me, well, why don't you change the helmets? Well, it's the same helmet since 1983. Like Alabama's had the same helmet since 1983. So it was really the test of tradition, like what the new coach at Hermitage was going to do and what was I going to do. And I knew what I was going to do. I was going to stick to what they had been doing. But talk about that. Like when you're an assistant coach and you're kind of, you know, you don't know, am I going to stay? Am I going to go? Am I going to get let go? Am I going to be able to stay on with the new coach? And go talk about that. We don't have to talk about any specifics, but
Yeah, well, for me, I'm a teacher in the building, and it's funny because Coach Kane got me to teach. That's the first thing he told me, to go get my teaching license, and that's how, and ultimately the rest is history. And see if I liked it. I liked it, fell in love with it, and then it is what it is. The rest is history. But as an assistant coach, I was so involved, so heavily involved in so many different aspects of what we did as a program. I never questioned I never questioned the fact that if I would be here or not. I knew I would be here. And most of it was because of just my level of involvement within the community. And I wasn't really looking to go nowhere. I'm not looking to go nowhere. In the perfect world, this is where I will finish.
There's a reason for that. I mean, if y'all don't know, they have a stadium that looks like a college, field turf field. They got players out at the yin yang. I mean, there's Highland Springs, there's Hermitage, there's Verina. I mean, I don't know who else I'm forgetting about, but I mean, on the north side of the James River, that's how Richmond is kind of broke down, y'all. I mean, he's at the program.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so obviously, we try to inform new guys about what what point we were at when they came in. Try to influence players to not leave, because when Kane left, players, parents, community, it was a muck. You know what I mean? It was kind of bad, to be honest with you. A lot of faith, a lot of doubt entered the zone of Hermitage. Just because of how great Kane was, obviously, and the things and how much on the cusp of, obviously doing it every year. He was just there every year. He was playing for state championship single year.
I mean, it's like the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, they had the same coach, since Bill Cowher. I mean, it's a consistency.
Yes, sir. My guy Andrew Lee leaving.
Yeah, what's up, man?
Yeah, man. So, it was just definitely interesting, and I've learned so much throughout the processes of transitioning. The year after him, and then the year after that, and then, it's been so many different transitions. I've just been in position to really.
Ego? I mean, what is it like when you see a coach take over a successful program and they change everything or a lot, and then you see it like really affect the program? Like, what is that like to be a part of? And what advice could you give someone that takes, like they always say, you don't want to be the guy that takes over for the guy, but sometimes you're that guy that takes over for the guy. Like, you don't want to be the coach that follows Nick Saban, but there has to be somebody.
Yeah, I mean, so I say, my advice, and then I go back to what happened with me. So I'm just gonna start with the advice. My advice is to be aware, first and foremost, of where the culture is and where the program is. You want to know your personnel. If your program has been successful, you want to run what they run, all right? And you can transition from what they run. If it wasn't successful, you still want to at least start with what they know and then build from there. For me, just to talk about, to Bedwell, he established the I system here. I fell in love with spread and zone. He was an eye guy, and we was running eye, pro eyes.
Yeah, I was going to interrupt and give perspective to the people that aren't familiar with the situation. So Hermitage had Coach Kane, and then brought in another coach for a year, and then they brought in Coach Bedwell, who'd been the head coach at LC Bird, won 3 state championships, and they were a spread team, but he brought the I formation. I mean, and he went undefeated. So that's coach is talking about, Coach Bedwell coming in, who has an entirely different philosophy than what Hermitage had done in the past, but was still successful, because I mean, he's a winner. He wins everywhere he's been.
Yes, and
when Bedwell about the eye and learning the eye formation from coach.
Yeah, so learned a lot of that. just learn some different nuances, some blocking schemes, obviously, and I learned how difficult teams had, because I don't feel like Herm had as difficult of a time as everyone else has in reference to dealing with the eye. But I got a chance to see it up close and personal. Like, yo, people really have a hard time stopping 21, because you do have to have a certain level of soundness on your defense to deal with that all game. So,
I mean, when everybody else is spread and somebody's pounding the ball with a tight end and a fullback, it kind of makes them different. It's like,
yes.
You don't see that every week.
No, you don't see it every week, and it's a different style of football. When Bedwell was here, shouts out to Bedwell. That was during COVID, so the situation and the circumstances were a little different. It was really more challenging then because of how we were allowed to operate and be around each other. We had to do all this 7 feet of spacing between drills, and it was giving us all these different instructions. So it challenged you as a coach. And we had 2 seasons in 1 year. We had spring and fall football season in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
But, for me, once, my number was called, it only made sense for me to start where we was. So we did have, we were a pro-I team and a little bit of spread. But in my mind, I did want to transition to spread slowly. And there was a point in that first season where, we completely transitioned just because it affected the style of practice. And ultimately, the rest was history. But
Coach Bedwell was there a year, and then Coach came in and had an interim year, and then this year was his first official year, but he's actually been head coach there 2 years.
Yes, sir.
I mean, pretty much teams that win are teams that do what they do, and they're better at it than the other team. They make less mistakes. So it doesn't matter whether you're spread or you're I or wing T. It's all about execution and making less mistakes.
Facts.
So like he's like a son to me, but Shane Reynolds became the head coach at Mechanicsville. And I told him, I said, dude, you're going to learn so much this year. I said, it's going to be like dog years. I was like, you're going to go like 7 years in a year by going to be a head coach. And he didn't understand what I meant. But talk about that. Like, do you learn more?
As a head coach, you learn so much more about what affects the game, what really affects the game. Because all fans see is football. But as a coach, you're so involved with every piece that you understand how every piece affects the bigger picture. And when you're a head coach, you kind of see that, you see how it affects your team. You see how little things affect the team. You see how maybe one coach's level of or lack of investment may affect certain players, or how having a strength and conditioning coach or maybe not having a strength and conditioning coach can affect the culture, or how, being too nice to kids could affect the culture, or being too stern to kids could affect the culture, or not taking accountability after the game could affect the culture. Or it's just so many different things that you see and you understand affect the game. And you start really truly understanding, like, the game is so much more than just football. It's so much more than football. And I learned so much my first year. I didn't think I was going to learn as much my second year. But wow, I learned way more my second year. But my first year, I think I learned more administrative from a first year standpoint. My second year, this year, I learned way more in reference to just football. Football, or what I say, etiquette, or on the field, maybe your involvement with referees or certain people that you may allow to be on the sideline versus, it's just so many different aspects that can influence your game, man. And, for me, I try to maximize, the involvement as long as it doesn't negatively affect what we have going on. But, you just learn. You learn what does work. You learn what doesn't work. And the most important part is you learn what's most important. you learn what's most important. Because at the end of the day, we all dealing with high school kids if you are a high school head coach. So our job is to groom them, inspire them, because a lot of high school kids may not truly understand the importance of the process. And if they don't understand the importance of the process and they're not inspired to be a part of the process, then they're probably not going to be a part of the process. And that affects your culture as well. So, it's there as a head coach, you just learn that everything matters.
It's almost like, how do you learn to ride a bike? Trying to ride a bike. It's a lot easier to coach when you're the assistant coach or you're in the stands and you could have said, we should have done this or we should have done that. But when your name's on it and you're responsible for it, you are going to learn more because you're doing it. You're just not saying, hey, when I get to be the head coach, we're going to do this. That's why we say, everybody wants to be the head coach until they're the head coach.
Be careful what you wish for, man.
And like you said, taking the wrong job could really, hurt you. Lou Holtz, told Urban Meyer when Urban Meyer was receiver coach at Notre Dame. You know the story?
No.
Yeah, Urban Meyer told Coach Holtz, he said, I don't think I'm going to take the Bowling Green job. And Coach Holtz said, why? And he said, well, I don't think it's a very good job. And Coach Holtz said, well, if it was a very good job, they wouldn't be hiring you. So it's like everybody wants to stall off at the top, and you're in one of the premier programs in Richmond, but you did your time at Highland Springs. You did your time through, 3 different coaching changes at Hermitage to get to where you are. So it wasn't just like it happened overnight. Overnight successes don't happen overnight. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, well, like you said, overnight success don't happen overnight, and there's no substitute for experience. So there is so much more I learned in the past 2 years than I learned in all of those other years, especially because the pressures of being a head coach weren't there. I was just able to just move, kind of operate a little bit differently because if the head coach is the one who has the magnifying glass on him most of the time. So sometimes the assistants, they could kind of, be a little more lax or whatever the case is. But the head coach has to be aware at all times. And fortunately for me, it's a gift and a curse when you're trying to be a perfectionist, because sometimes you can be so hard on yourselves that, sometimes you just got to give yourself a break, which is something I'm learning how to do. I'm learning how to, manage the ebbs and flows of the season, the off season, in between, and learning when to apply pressure versus when not to apply pressure. Because
that was something Coach Bedwell was great at. Coach Bedwell was great at that. He knew when to turn it on.
Yes. That's one of the. That's
a long season. Like in Virginia, you have to play 15 weeks, not count preseason to win a state championship.
Yep. Facts. I mean, that's one of the things that I definitely learned from Bedwell. Bedwell and Kane are 2 opposite personalities, completely.
And there's no one way to skin a cat. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to win. I mean, you coached with 3 Hall of Fame coaches: Coach Loren Johnson, Highland Springs, Coach David Bedwell, and Coach Patrick Kane. And all 3 of them are different. Yeah. Can you talk about that? Like the differences between the 3?
I think, Kane is more of a disciplinarian, structured, organized.
And where's the time on the sidelines? I mean, math teacher.
Yep. Definitely about mathematics. Definitely about, the percentages and, the data. Bedwell was just kind of more opposite, laid back. Definitely a mastermind when it comes to certain offensive things, certain strategies. Mastermind when it comes to motivating kids and being able to
swag.
Yes, the swag.
The master that swag.
Absolutely, gotta have that. So I learned that, because if you teach and if you learn under Coach Kane's system, you would think, well, alone. If you learn the system alone, I used to believe like, well, you got to be, the entire time to be an effective program. But I learned that, that's not necessarily the case. And I learned that with Bedwell, you know, that, you know, you don't have to necessarily be as much of a stickler, but I think they connected with kids differently. They had different connections with kids. And then, you know, Johnson is kind of like the blend of them both, essentially, to me. You know, because Johnson, he, you know, he could be strict on guys at times, but he can also, you know, get right with the swag or this, that, and the third. You know, so, you know, he's kind of like a blend to me. He's kind of like the middle in reference to temperament. You know, you have Kane, Johnson, and then the Bedwell temperament, you know, left to right, right to left more so. But, you know, they all did it their way, which is, I think, the most important part. You know, I think when you're trying to achieve anything in this life, in this world, especially with the game of football, you have to make it your own, but you also have to make it relatable. Because if it's not genuine, then people gonna know, and the information gonna be distorted, and it's gonna be hard to execute that, especially with kids. You know, and I learned that from John Gruden. It's funny. At the Redskins camp, I went with Coach Kane, and he used to tell coaches like, "Oh, y'all got all this information in your head, but it don't matter if the kids can't learn it." You know, so blessed and fortunate to be able to coach under those guys, man. But yeah, they all had their own identity. They're all their own person. And, you know, I hope to be my own person. Well, I am my own person, and I hope to make my own, you know, a stamp based on.
How old are you now, Coach? Just for the people that are watching.
38.
You're 38. So,
38.
like, I always think of being a young coach and remembering back, and you kind of, when you first start, you take on the personality of the coaches that you played for. And then, like, as you go, you learn different styles, and you kind of, I mean, it's almost like your personality just in life, that you take on the personality of the people that you're around. And then that whole mixture becomes kind of who you are. So, like a young coach like Coach Lambeau, who's only been, you know, not even coaching for a year, you know, what could you tell him on his coaching journey?
Man, I tell you this, man, look, just learn from people who have done things that you want to do. Learn from people who have taken experiences or had the experiences that you want to have. And when I say learn, like, really pay attention to them, really listen, really watch how people respect them, watch how people interact and respond to them. And just pay attention, you know, especially when you're in a position, if you're in any position to watch a successful coach, or watch a playoff coach in the 804, or watch a coach who's seasoned, and to show they've been, you know, have a significant experience. Pay attention, learn, and take some responsibilities. Like, ask the coach to help him do something. Take something off his plate so you can learn how to do just an aspect of what the head coach has to do daily, which is something I had to ask Coach Kane. I told Coach Kane, like, one day I want to be a head coach, so if you could just give me some more responsibilities, you know, and he gladly gave me more responsibilities. And those responsibilities essentially is what prepared me to do or to be where I am now, as a head coach. Is there a lot more I can still learn? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to keep doing that. But, you know, my advice would just be, you know, take advantage of the opportunities that you have when you are around these coaches. Ask questions, pay attention to what's going on, and help. Get involved. You know, be involved.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty awesome. You know, we started the coaches clinic in 2009, and last year we had it. It was bigger than ever. And then this year I decided I didn't want to do it. And then 2 days ago, I said, hey, I'm going to do a podcast and put it on Totem Sports. And we've had Emory Henry, offensive coordinator. Now we've had you. And I mean, when I was a young coach, we had to get DVDs or VHSs or bootlegs and like read books. But now young coaches, they can watch YouTube. I mean, how many years you've been coaching since you were 21, 22, and you're 38 now. So, I mean, that's 16 years of experience that a young coach could watch this video on YouTube and, you know, really learn. So it's pretty cool, man. You know, I look forward to having you back on. I mean, it's pretty cool, man. I wish I would have done this before now, but I guess, everything in time.
Yes, sir.
What if anything you would like to leave the listeners with, before we go, or how they can contact you if they have any other questions?
Well, parents, I would say this, I don't know if parents watching this, probably coaches watching this. But, one thing I tried to do this year is I tried to overreach when it comes to the parents. And I was, one of the biggest things that I suggest to coaches is make sure that you are putting more emphasis on the structure than trying to control somebody else's structure.
And because what do you mean by that? Clarify that.
So kids are going to operate based on the standards of the structure. All right. Kids go home, they're going to operate how they're used to operating in their home. All right. When kids in the Hermitage, they need to be used to operating how we operate at Hermitage or how we operate within the program. And sometimes we may try to influence kids outside of the program when that's not our power. And our power is really influencing the kids through having a structured program and that program being consistent. And that's something I had to learn because I would try to educate parents so much. And I'm trying to spend time having meetings. And I've had coaches say to me, Coach, man, you don't need to keep having these meetings with parents. But I'm really trying to educate them because there is a level of ignorance that we all are ignorant to a certain extent. But there's a level of ignorance that some parents have that may be contrary or contradict the progress of the program. And you want them to be as aware as possible with all of the changes that's going on with recruiting, with NIL, with, just being knowledgeable about what it really takes to play college football. Because a lot of parents don't understand that, especially Division I. Everybody want to play Division I football. Division I football is for dogs. It's for big dogs because there are big athletes that play in Division I, and a lot of parents haven't seen these guys in person. And I'm like, well, do you want your son playing against these kids? First off, he won't be able to if he can. However, if we could magically make it happen, and I sat you at a practice, I guarantee you probably will take him home because there's a level of aggressiveness that some parents don't understand is required with football. And I would share with them some of my experience, and they would say, Coach, you crazy. I'm like, no, that's football. You know what I mean? One experience I shared with them was when I played at Norfolk State, we played FAMU. I beat a tackle off the edge. I was a stand-up and linebacker, played nickel on a 3-4, which is weird, HBCU stuff, whatever. Came off the edge, I beat this tackle, and I took the wrong shoulder on the quarterback. So I took the bottom shoulder, so he rolled out. So I redirected, and as I'm going flat, that same tackle that I beat the first time, he saw me, and he knocked my helmet off. I got up clapping in his face because I was excited. When you that level of violence, like when you're in the game, you would get excited. And the parents were like, "You crazy?" I'm like, "No, that's Division I football. That's the kind of mindset and mentality your son needs to have if he plans to play Division I football. Not to mention the talent, the ability, the height, the weight. All right. And I, as a head coach, am the only one who's probably testing your son out to see if he has that. So when I'm telling you there's certain aspects of his mental development or toughness that we got to develop, it's not me coming at your son. It's me giving you a more realistic perspective of what needs to take place going to the next level. So I'm saying that to say those conversations, go in one ear, out the other. But having a proper structure in place that develops kids to get closer to that mentality, to be more accurately reflecting of what's necessary on the next level, whether it's Division I, II, III, because they all are competitive levels of football, is more important than trying to educate the entire community. Bridging gaps is one thing. You got to do that in the community, but you can't try to educate people in their home. You got to educate in your structure.
I keep thinking back to what Shane said. He's like, Troy, I don't know if you want to do a podcast because you don't want to put too much information out there. But, one day I'll be long gone, man, but this will still be there. I think about coaches like Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick and Urban Meyer, who they coached, guys like Lawrence Taylor and Aaron Hernandez. And, I mean, they had the structure where those guys were able to, survive and to thrive. But when they're not around those coaches, other things happen. So it's like these guys, what makes them so great and why are they able to, put these structures in place for these guys, but do the guys still follow that same structure when they're not around that coach? I always had that question, and I think about that because, as a high school coach, the players are out in the parking lot, this guy sagging his pants, but, it makes me think about that, what you're talking about. The structures are in place when they're around, these guys who have coached these players who were unstructured when they weren't around the coach. So.
Yeah, and that's why we coach. That's why we do the game of football. We try to give guys a structure that they operate in long enough for them to mature to be able to identify with something that allows them to, be able to take it on their own. You know what I mean? So that's why I love the game of football. Football gave me that opportunity as a young man. Before I jumped into the real world, it gave me about 5 years after high school to mature as a young man. Because a lot of kids are not ready for the real world, and they're going right into it after high school. So, yeah, man, I'm just grateful, man. I'm grateful.
And this is our ministry, and I appreciate you coming on, man. I mean, this was easy talking to you.
Yeah, definitely, man. I appreciate you having me, man. I was a little disappointed you wasn't having a clinic this year, but I see that what you're doing now, I think this is going to actually reach more people. And it's 2023 now, so you moving it forward.
Yeah, everybody always said, Troy, why ain't you taping? Why ain't you taping the speakers? Can you post them? I guess now we can even have more speakers and post more. And I actually get to sit in and ask questions because I always be the guy asking all the questions.
Right.
So, I appreciate you, Coach, man. You're the best, man.
No, man, you are, man. And, we'll talk. We'll link up, man. Hopefully at some point this offseason, man, I get with you. And obviously, hopefully you're taking some time off before we get back to work.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
Yes, sir.
Good time, man. Thank you, brother.